we're going to be learning a little bit about how electricity is used around the world today, which hopefully you already know a little bit about. As we know, electricity is used practically everywhere, and we often take it for granted. We have very many uses for electricity, including heating with electric heaters, lighting with light bulbs and fluorescent bulbs, and these are in fact the two most common uses of electricity, as well as things like cooling, like for air conditioning or fans, computing, or entertainment, things like that, and so on. Now, electricity has only really gained popularity in the last few hundred years, even though technically it's always been around. So prior to this, we didn't use electricity for everything, obviously. Instead, we used different energy sources. Our ancestors used things like coal or wood or wax in order to heat and light their houses. Wind and water have also been important power sources. Examples of this are in water wheels or windmills. So the use of water wheels, in fact, dates back more than 3,000 years, which means that it's been used as a power source for much longer than electricity has. Sailing ships use wind power, of course. Their sails are able to capture some of the kinetic energy of the wind, which helps to drive them forwards. Now, in the early 20th century, around the time that this photograph was taken, there were no labor-saving devices in the home. Of course, today we have many electrically powered labor-saving objects. So it took a lot of energy to perform common tasks, things which now we simply do with electricity, with very little effort on our parts. For washing clothes, for example, the water to wash the clothes with would need to be heated by a wood fire, and then the clothes would need to be hand washed. Today, an electric appliance, the washing machine, can do all of this for us using only electricity, and of course a bit of water. Another thing that we take for granted today is food storage. The lack of refrigeration made food storage and preservation a very hard task before the days of electricity. In Australia, things like the electric refrigerator did not become common until the late 1950s, which is quite a long time to wait, given that we're in such a hot continent. So what did we do before we had the fridge? Well, we did in fact have ways of storing and preserving food. Prior to the invention of the electric refrigerator, we used things like ice boxes, which are boxes filled half with ice so that it cools down everything inside, or refrigerators powered by kerosene. So the availability of energy for domestic purposes has roots in the Industrial Revolution. We can see an artist's illustration of a day in the revolution over here. The Industrial Revolution was a time in the 1800s when steam-powered devices were invented. And of course, steam engines are able to extract the energy in things like coal and oil in order to produce large amounts of energy. So the steam engine appeared in about 1712, and during the next few centuries became increasingly popular. It was improved by James Watt about halfway through the 18th century and was used in very many applications. It could produce enormous amounts of kinetic energy, which is very useful for things like factories. So steam engines were used industrially well into the 20th century, that is the 1900s. We can see a picture here of a steam-powered car, as it were, a moving device. So the use of gas, another energy source for lighting and cooking, began in the 19th century, which is the 1800s. This was used to do things like light lamps or warm ovens. And around this time, electricity was developed. The use of electricity allowed the transfer of all this power and all this energy to various different places, even over long distances. Of course, today we know that electric generators are located well outside of cities, and the electricity that they produce is sent through power lines, often hundreds of kilometers long, to the cities that require the electricity. This is certainly more useful than the energy produced by steam engines, which had to be used pretty much on site. Right, so that's the end of the theory. We've learned a bit about the history of energy sources in our society. Let's go on to some questions.